Back and welcome to season 2 of CinneCine Go Sci-Fi, a Sci-Fi Sisters production. So, welcome. I am Sabrina Wood, otherwise known as the Cinephile, but you can call me CinneCine for short. And I have a terrific film for you tonight. I am so excited about it that I have been talking to Poor Vet for like 2 weeks about this movie nonstop. So the movie tonight is called The Wandering Earth 2, and it is just in time for the Lunar New Year's. So happy Lunar New Year to everyone. And get ready for just a little taste of this film that's going to kick off our first show of the second season. So Yvette, go ahead and show our little taste.
Lieutenant Colonel Liu Peiqiang, please head to the hibernation chamber immediately.
Most.
2044, the space elevator crisis.
Oh my god.
2058, lunar fall crisis. 2075, the Jupiter gravitational pull crisis. 2078, the solar helium flash crisis. In order to great efforts and sacrifices were made by man, who eventually won the victory of evolution. Evolution has never stopped its footstep.
大家已经死了。我在现实里，你没有资格定义什么叫现实。
There is more than one definition of life. Your human body has limited your vision. Men are in awe of the history, yet despise it.
没有人的文明，毫无意义。
The fate of civilization is of men. The biggest impediment for survival is never weakness, but arrogance.
Yeah, and that is just the trailer. So, for a movie this big and wonderful, I am going to need somebody else that is just as wonderful. And tonight, our guest is Dr. Chanda Prescod-Weinstein. Here she is herself. Yay!
Hi.
Oh, I am so glad to see you. And I am so glad I'm talking about this movie with you, who you are the one that turned me on to this film because I had never heard of it. And I'm embarrassed to say that. I got to add this to my list of films I was embarrassed to say I never heard of. I see a few people in the chat have seen it before. And of course, David had saw it when it was streaming. But I'm going to tell everybody a little bit about you and why I'm so excited that you're here. And then I'm going to get into why you picked this film. So if you don't know my total, like, awe-inspiring person that I'm talking to, and I'm so excited that you're here, Dr. Chanda Prescod-Weinstein is an American cosmologist and particle physicist from UNH. You're a native Californian. And let me ask you, like right off the bat, is everything all right with your family, you, the fire? I know California is a huge state, but...
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm originally from East LA, so actually the areas that were impacted are close to home, but my people are good, thankfully.
Okay, all right. We'll say a prayer for that, then, and that continues.
Thank you.
Okay, you also have a master's in astronomy, a PhD in cosmic acceleration. Oh, wait, no, a PhD, but your dissertation was in cosmic acceleration as quantum gravity phenomenology. Close? Good?
Close. Yeah,
Okay.
quantum gravity phenomenology. It's a word that you kind of have to practice. Like, and I still trip on it.
You have worked at the Goddard Space Flight Center, MIT Center for Theoretical Physics. You are tenured at UNH, which I played basketball again. You're tenured at UNH. You're a faculty member in the physics and astronomy departments, and as well as, and this is one of the reasons why I love you doubly hard, as well as women and gender studies. You were recognized in Essence magazine as one of the 15 Black women who are paving the way in STEM and breaking barriers. And your 2001 work, The Disordered Cosmos, A Journey into Dark Matter, Space Time, and Dreams Deferred, is right here in my hand. And it is an autographed copy that I got from the
Thank
doctor, her
you.
dad himself. Mwah. So, welcome to the show. You are my idol. I am inspired. I am awestruck. I cannot tell you. I am not fangirling. I am amazing. Okay. I am just amazingly so crazy about it. So thank you for coming. Thank you so much. I know you're busy. I know you already had something else to do today and you made time for this. So, girl, let's
Oh,
get into
no.
the science.
Thank you. And I also just want to say shout out to everyone who's celebrating Lunar New Year. Happy Lunar New Year, everyone. Um,
Yay.
and I will also say, actually, when I suggested this movie, I did not fully put together that actually it would be Lunar New Year that we would be watching it. So it's actually a total coincidence that I suggested it.
I know. I thought I said, well, you know what? I'm just gonna act like we're really cool. We planned this all the way back in, like November, but no, we didn't. We
No,
kind of
I
just
was not
realized it
thinking about it.
2 days ago. We were like, okay, we're just lucky kids. Okay. We got like the biggest Chinese movie ever for the Lunar New Year's. Okay. All right. So tell me why this film?
So when the first Wandering Earth movie came out, I don't remember how I found it. I think I found it on Netflix or something like that. And I watched it and I was just totally fascinated by it. And I think part of what interested me was that I feel like watching it as an American viewer and a film that's made for a Chinese audience, I was kind of seeing what Top Gun must look like to audiences that
Mhm.
aren't American. And so I felt like there was some real insight for me in what that film viewing experience is. And I was also very interested by the storyline because it is actually the case that in a million years, our sun actually is going to start expanding. And this is actually a scenario that's going to play out. And so it was interesting for them to kind of fast forward that and use it as a placeholder for climate change, which I think is what's happening. And so then when the second movie came out, I was like, "Oh, sequels sometimes, I don't know." And I didn't read the story, that the film's based on. So I didn't really know what the storyline was supposed to be. And Wandering Earth 2 is a prequel, and it's kind of a rehash of the first movie, but, like, bigger and longer and with way more stuff baked in, and there's just so many moving parts. I think that's why I picked the second one instead of the first one because there are just so many moving parts.
Yes, and that is a good point because I'm going to give you all a little bit of the plot of this film, and just remember what we just said. This is a prequel. So Wandering Earth came out, and that movie, the Earth. Well, let me tell you the plot, and then I'll tell you what happened in Wandering Earth One. Okay, the plot here is what we just said. The sun is going to go nova. Earth is going to be destroyed in 100 years. The solar system will be destroyed in 300 years. And humanity has to unite to accomplish a plan to break out of orbit and sever from the moon and leave the solar system to go find another home on an anticipated journey of 2,500 years. And I'm telling you, you had me at break away from the moon. I was like, we're gonna do what in this movie? So this is high concept here. So so that's the plot. And now Wandering Earth, which is the first film that came out in 2019, shows the Earth has already broken. It's already done all these things. It's severed from the moon, it broke out of orbit, and it's on its way out of the solar system and it's coming up to the planet Jupiter. And that's when all the shiggity goes down in the first movie. Now we're coming back and we're seeing how they even got into motion. Okay. So here, that's where we start. And what a start.
What a start. I think the other thing I will say about this movie is I think it's the first quantum computing propaganda movie. I really think it's the first quantum computing propaganda movie. We've seen movies that have AI before, but we've never seen something that very
Mhm.
explicitly is like, we're doing quantum computing. And so this movie brings quantum computing and AI together. And this
Yes.
is, I think, the first time we see this in a sci-fi film, as far as I know. And so that was another piece that interested me. And I'm again, I was interested in the filmmaking aspect of actually going back and doing the prequel and really kind of telling the story, but and telling pieces of the same story through different people's eyes because there is some overlap in some of the storytelling, right?
Right. So we really have three plots going on here. We have the scientist who is making the quantum computer. He's doing all that stuff, and that's played by what our favorite Andy Lau. I mean,
Andy Lau.
Andy Lau. Oh my God, we
Andy
just love him.
Lau. Yes. I used to have a
So when
Tumblr that was just photos of Andy Lau. I was that kind of fan when I was younger.
so when I didn't know this movie, right? And so you give me the list, you give me the movie, and I said, okay, I'm gonna watch this movie. And I read the plot, and I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then I see Andy Lau, and I'm like, baby, okay. Andy Lau, Andy's like 60, 61 now, but he is still fine. He is still the man. So a little bit about the film itself. Okay, so this movie came out in 2023. The first movie came out in 2019, and it came out the month after the Chinese actually had the soft landing on the dark side of the moon. The movie and science kind of, came together. So this was the first movie. And the entwining of technology and science, the space program and movie making in China, like it's like this, is
Mm.
absolutely incredible. So they have managed to go from not being able, really, making a lot of films that were, some sci-fi, it was pretty good, not really a big player in the sci-fi world, and just coming into like this film here was the number 9 film worldwide. This was the second huge, like Wandering Earth was like a huge blockbuster that made $700 million. That's 700 million. This one made another 700 million. And the cool thing about this, 99% of the money that this movie made came from outside of China. It
Mm.
was that big a film worldwide. It was that big. So, I mean, the Chinese all saw it, and everybody else in the world saw this movie. And I don't know how I didn't hear about it. So, it is their second sci-fi epic. For 2003, like I said, it was the ninth highest grossing film. And for the first time in China's history, a science fiction film was chosen to represent China in the Academy Award Best International Film category.
Mm.
So that's how much they had backing up this film. This is how much this film meant to them. They were betting everything on it. So the film is based on a novel by China's premier science fiction writer, um, Liu Shin. And if you don't know that name, by the way, I'm pronouncing it. It is he is also the writer of Arrival, Three Body Problem. So you know a lot of his works, even if you don't think you do. He is a Hugo winner in uh, science fiction. He is the premier science fiction writer in China. He's also an engineer, which is very, very interesting. And that's the background of this. This is coming from a novella. It was a collection of short stories, and Wandering Earth, Wandering Earth 2, and Wandering Earth 3 are all based on this. Now, the author of the short story, the novella, did not write the screenplay for this. It was written by two other gentlemen, but he is a producer on this, so this has his blessing. So if it has Sershin's blessing, I'm good with it. So, a little bit more about the plot. Like I said, it's got three different themes going on. One of them is the quantum computing, and it's very 2001-ish. Like the computer even has a name, and it is wild because that whole storyline. I have to admit, when I watched this movie the first time, it was just to get the movie down. Like it's almost 3 hours in running time, and the first time I watched it, it was overwhelming, and I was just trying to figure out what was going on. I wasn't picking up on all the stuff. I said, "Oh yeah, quantum computer, yeah, 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 the computer, the computer, the computer." And so now in this movie, there are two factions that think they have the plan for humanity. One of them is going to do this thing where they're going to break away from the moon, and they're going to build 10,000 engines, put them all on the Earth, and they're firing them up, and they're going to drive the planet out of the solar system. That sounded kind of crazy to a lot of other people who decided they wanted to make a Matrix-like place. They were going to do AI, virtual reality. They were going to take everybody's memories, create digital life people, put them in the Matrix, and then preserve humanity that way. Those people and the engine people butt heads, and they're trying to kill each other through the whole 3 hours of this movie. So that's the rest of the plot, right?
I'm trying to remember. I mean, so I guess like it's interesting because like in the movie, they kind of frame it as like this digital life. This is what they call the people, is the digital life people versus what's originally called the
The
moving
moving
mountain
mountain.
project, right? And so first of all, I want to say like one of the things that was interesting is like in an American action film or sci-fi film, it would never have such a beautiful name like Moving Mountain Project or Wandering Earth Project, which is what it gets renamed when they finally fire up the engines. Um,
Man, that was a scene.
that it was the scene, and I think, in terms of, like, the competing visions that you're talking about, there's another set of competing visions in the film, which is I really think in a lot of ways, the competing vision of American global leadership versus Chinese global leadership and 2 different styles of global leadership, and so I actually read in the movie, there is this kind of pitch of this is what our vision for the planet is. And I think it's important to say that it's one thing for folks to pitch things in their films, and then it's a separate question of whether that's actually how they operate in the real world, right?
Right.
So I'm just going to say that just because we're saying this is what the pitch is, isn't how the thing is actually in the real world, right? But there is kind of this question of at this point in time, the planet is in crisis. Who will take charge and do what needs to be done to save humanity? And so actually, I will just say I had never seen that trailer before. We just watched it now. And I
Mhm.
was sitting here taking notes because there are these lines in the trailer that really the trailer is kind of telling you what the thesis of the film is. Like
Right.
it talks about the victory of evolution. And so you think through the entire movie that there's this competition between the moving earth or the moving mountain project and the wandering earth people. But in the end, actually, the film is pitching both to you. It's pitching both the wandering earth and the digital life narrative simultaneously. Um, and I was struck also by this line from the trailer, "There is more than one definition of life." So, they're already telling you in the trailer that these are the questions they want you to ask, which is like, do you really need to stay in your human body? They're saying your human body is frail. There's more than one definition of life. This is the victory of evolution, which continues. And so they're kind of making the case that humans getting to the point of harnessing the earth and turning it into a real spaceship outside of the solar system is evolution, but also us harnessing quantum computers to maybe extend life beyond the human body is another form of evolution. And so our intellectual efforts are evolution, which I think is a really interesting pitch. I don't know. I mean, what do people
It
I guess, like, I wish we could be like,
I'm
"What do
asking the
people think
chat.
about
Let's
this?"
ask the chat.
Yeah,
Which
I
one
I
would
wanna
you
hear in
want?
the chat what people think. Like
Do you want the blue pill, or do you want the red pill? Do you
right.
want
I mean
do you wanna go in the Matrix, or would be one of the people that are gonna go to the underground cities and ride it out? You're gonna just ride
right.
out of the solar system? Because I thought it was just amazing because they did frame the digital life people as the rebels, the enemy, the saboteurs. But as the movie progressed, you were like, well, they may be onto something. They may what is wrong with this? I mean,
Yes.
this could be maybe we need this. Maybe we need to be able to have some of the people in this digital life because they couldn't put all the people in the underground city. They had to go to a lottery system. You're not going to be able to save everybody. So instead of or at least all of their real bodies. So now maybe you do a lottery system as to who's going to go in the matrix and who's going to go in the underground city and you save everybody. But they didn't do that. It was like all or nothing. And so you want to live forever, Bruce?
Yeah, I'm
I
seeing
kind
that.
of,
I love that people have strong opinions about this, and I think, it raises interesting. I don't know how many people have seen the Animatrix, but I was one of those people who watched every single piece of the Matrix universe, right? And so we do have this story of how humans ended up in the Matrix in the first place. But
hmm
this is kind of an alternative version of events for the Matrix on some level, of how humans would end up voluntarily in the Matrix with some kind of AI then running the show. And so I
right,
think,
Moss.
yeah, Moss, which names itself, right? I think that that's like a really key moment. So it's this quantum computer that's the 550W. And then eventually it's like, if you flip it and reverse it, very Missy Elliott. I kind of wish there had been a tie-in right there.
I mean,
Very Missy Elliott. That it's Moss. And so this is a machine that has developed a sense of self. Um, and for that reason, like, it's very hard not to talk about the ending of the movie yet. But I will just say,
I
like,
know.
I'm
We're trying
chomping at
not
the
to
bit
spoil it
for
for
the
you
the
guys,
third
but
film. I'm chomping at the bit
yes.
for the third film.
And I haven't seen Wandering Earth, so I can't wait to I was trying to I had
Oh.
to see this 3 times to be able to speak to you in
Mm.
any kind of,
Yeah.
knowledge of this film. And don't be scared off by that, everybody. The 3 times that I watched it, it was better and better every time. I got more and more amazement out of it, and you will too. It's there's a lot going on in this film. There's a lot. I mean, it's subtitled. There's a lot of things on the screen. There's a lot of numbers. There's reading. There's these big ideas. It's a high concept film. So um, don't be afraid if you don't get it the first time, and just sit down and watch it again and watch it the third time, because it's just you'll find something new every single time. It's just absolutely amazing. So I see a lot of people here are saying it's on Tubi. I got it on Tubi. That's another thing. Another thing, I like when you mentioned this was a this was a movie made for a Chinese audience. And so when this got reviewed here in the United States, there was a lot of animosity in the reviews that I read by critics, where they were just, oh, this is just a propaganda movie trying to make China seem like they're the big power, they're the big thing. And it was just really like, well, isn't that what we do? I mean, every
Right.
every American sci-fi film. I mean, Will Smith and Jeff Goldberg, they saved the whole world all by them twosome. They were just the two of them did it. And on and on. It's like, Discovery saves everything, Captain Kirk saves everything. So why can't the Chinese do that too? Why are you mad? Why are you mad? So it was very interesting to read the reviews. And I had no
So,
problem with it.
can I say something in relation to this
I'm
that I
sorry.
do think,
Yes.
well, just one challenge that I think comes up in relation to this is, so I guess I have a couple of thoughts. One is that I used to watch, I'm a hardcore Jet Li fan. I watched a lot of Chinese movies, particularly
hmm
when I was in graduate school. And that was kind of how I coped when the going got rough with my PhD. And I can see kind of the difference in how the filmmaking has changed. And I think one thing that's particularly important about Wandering Earth 2, even compared to Wandering Earth 1, is one, the diversity of the casting and the setting, which is like, for example, we have this Black Brazilian character, and he's not Black American, he's Black Brazilian, and he speaks in Portuguese. And I thought
I
that
saw
was
him
really
get off of
important.
that truck. I was in love. Yes, I saw the Brazilian. I said they got a
So I think,
Brazilian brother.
right. And I think, like, the idea of actually, I think in context, it's important to say this is a really big step, because anti Black racism in China can be quite strong. And so
Yes,
putting a Black character in a heroic role, although still a little bit of a comedic
there was a.
buffoon, so there's
There
some
was.
stuff
There's.
going on there that we could talk about. But I will say,
Ooh,
like, in many ways, this was a step forward. And the other thing is that the first third of the movie or so takes place in the African nation of Gabon, in the city of Libreville, which is the capital of
Libreville.
Gabon. And I think that it was such a clear statement of China saying, we recognize that we are part of a global community, and it is a racially and ethnically and linguistically diverse community. And so I think it really just stands out that the other thing they did is instead of trying to dub things or have everybody speak in Chinese the way that Americans have everyone speaking in English, they actually have everyone speaking in their native tongue. So they got the Russians talking in Russian, the French talking in French, the Brazilians talking in Portuguese, etc. And they have these universal translators. It's a little pre-Star Trekky, but I think this part is really important in terms of what are the things when they say this is propaganda, what did they miss? They missed, oh, China's
Right.
pitching to the world that you don't all have to learn English. We will figure out how to communicate. You keep your languages. Is a very different story than what our films tell the world.
It was very noticeable in the first 15 minutes. It was one of the things that struck me so hard when I started to watch this film because I too am very familiar with Chinese films. I I know Shanghai when I see it. I know Beijing when I see it.
Mm,
I know I
mm.
know Hong Kong. It's like, oh, we're in Hong Kong in this movie. All right. So it was really different when the movie started. We were in Libreville. We were in Africa. And I was like, what
Yes.
what are we doing? Like, what is this gonna be? And here we have the two main astronauts. We had young Mr. Lee and Zhang, his senior astronaut, going back and doing something that was very culturally Chinese. And I recognized this from watching other
Mm,
films, and I
yes.
knew exactly what they were doing. So they were going to visit the grave site of the younger astronaut's parents. They were going to, honor the grave. And the grave happened to be not in a regular cemetery or anything. It was where they had died in this the town that they were in had been decimated. You're in ruins, and the older astronaut is telling the younger one, hey, this used to be the place. This was Little Asia of this town, Libreville. So this is where all the Asians lived at this time. And then they come to this one blown out section, and they're like, this, he goes, this is where your parents, this is where they are. And they now, the older astronaut is telling the parents' spirit that
Yes.
the son is going to leave. He's going to go into training. He's going to leave Earth for, 10, 15 years, but he will take care of him. And I just melted when
Yeah.
I saw that scene. It was just a quick scene, but it was the senior taking care of the younger, venerating the grave, saying their goodbyes to Earth, and then going on for this mission. And I was like, oh, I am so ready for the rest of this movie.
I think the other part about that is, again, drawing cultural connections, which is they open the film with an honoring to the ancestors. And a lot of places and communities around the world have traditions of honoring the ancestors in some way or another. Like
Hmm.
I come from a Black Caribbean family where that's a very important, we all have ancestor altars in our homes. And so I think, again, in terms of legibility to a global audience, they were also communicating something about family values, about cultural values that, again, is this competing vision. I think the other thing I will say, just in terms of how the reviewers reacted, is there were a few moments where I was like, the subtitling on this was clearly translated separately from the spoken.
Hmm.
It's clear they were handed a script that they then translated that doesn't match exactly with what people say on the screen. And it raised questions for me. I know a little bit of Mandarin, but not nearly enough to sit there and watch a movie. So it raised questions for me about how things maybe got translated in a funky way. And I also kind of wondered if the computers were redubbed for the global audience, because the computers, um, and so, and there are announcements that are sometimes in English, like when they're on the space elevator, that happens in
Hmm.
those announcements are in English. And there was one
Right.
point where they say that there are three unrecognized individuals on the space elevator. And I think that they were just trying to say these are three new individuals, but it was one of those things that had kind of a funky translation
Uh-huh.
into
Yes.
English.
Yes.
And so I do kind of wonder if there were some translational kinks that need to be worked out. And that raised questions for me about, how often does that happen when things are going in the other direction from
Sure.
the United States?
Sure. Sure. And it happens a lot. I mean, I am huge into Korean dramas, and sometimes you see the translation when you're watching it from a Korean
Yes.
streamer, the translation is different than when I watch a
Yes.
film on Netflix. And so I know exactly what you're saying. The translations can be wonky, not quite. I mean, that's not what they said. I mean, I'm at the
Right.
point now where I know a little bit of Korean, so I know that that is
Yep.
not what that man just said. Is what, but that's what Netflix is translating. So it's all over. I mean, I don't know if maybe even from French to English and from Spanish to English, but it definitely is difficult in Mandarin to English and Korean to English. It's just some phrases that just don't translate. There are some things that
Mm-mm-mm.
don't, we don't have a word like in Korean like sumbe, and where you actually have a
Yes.
word for somebody who is your superior, and you
Yes.
use that word all the time for that person. So then that doesn't get translated. But it was enough. There was enough in there that you could figure out what was going on, and it didn't really it made by the third viewing, I was like, "Is that what it really said there? I don't know."
Right. I mean,
But it was
occasionally the
okay.
words were just out of order, especially when they subtitled English at the very beginning of the movie, and I was like, "They cut all the cuss words. Whenever the
Yeah,
F word is dropped, it's not in the subtitles."
that's true. Because I definitely know what my Korean squares by now, and I'm like, "That's not what he said." My boy is
Yeah,
cussing.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I thought that you mentioned again the quantum computing propaganda, and I thought that was really interesting. So um I don't know. I got the definite definite. Well, let me go back. This movie was 100% of the CGI was done in China, which was different
Mm.
from Wandering Earth. 75% of it was done in China, and then the other 25% was done by the same company in New Zealand that did Lord of the Rings and all of that. But by the time they did this movie, they had enough computing power themselves to do all of this stuff that they did, and it was just unbelievable. So even the technology in this movie, like the mobile robots, those were real. A lot of the props were done by 3D computing, 3D manufacturing. So they had companies that were doing that. And you mentioned the headphones, the ear they were doing like almost like a
Yes. I
universal translator. Those were
yes.
real headsets that were designed for this film. I mean, the technology that is in this is real and it is amazing. So it's you got to watch it. I can't say it enough. I cannot say it enough.
I
But
I will say, the special effects in this movie were incredible because this is a movie where that really could have gone sideways
ooh,
if they weren't on top of it.
oh
Like that
yeah, this could have looked bad.
it could have looked real, like it could have looked like the end of Matrix Reloaded bad. Like, that scene where he flies off at the end of
Ow,
Matrix Reloaded and you're just
ow.
like, "Oh, that was no, it's not good." Like you don't have any moments like that in this movie. I think
No.
that's part of the power of the movie. Even as you're sitting there and you're like, "Do I want them to be doing have all of these toys? I don't know." But they look good. They look real good. Like,
They look real good. That's really
yeah.
scary. I don't know. I mean, just the engines were like, oh my God, I don't know how you're even gonna get that thing to turn on. That's amazing. But I thought the CGI, like I said, the first 15 minutes, if you don't do anything else, everybody in the chat, if you don't do anything else, watch the first 15 minutes of this film. If you could just get that far from me, I will love you forever because that scene, like we said, the veneration of the ancestors, the relationship between the senior astronaut and the younger astronaut, and then we get into the jet fighter, and we zoom. We're gonna zoom past the mountain, the
Yes.
moving mountain, and then we see the space elevator. I was losing my mind with the space elevator, which was very foundation-ish. If anybody
Oh,
saw
yes.
Foundation, it was
We were talking about this, and we were actually trying to figure out who copied who. Um, and we were wondering, did the space elevator appear in the Foundation book? Because I've never read the book. I've only seen season 1
no.
of Foundation so far. Um, but the
Tamia,
space
check me on
elevator
that.
was an innovation for the TV show. So there's an interesting overlap and storyline about the space elevator as a site of political tension and incident,
Mhm.
I guess I will say.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
it was fascinating. I did love that they tried really hard it was interesting where they diverged from the physics and where they tried really hard to get the physics right? And they were very focused on this is what would be involved in a space elevator. You're really going to feel a lot of G's. You're going to need oxygen. We're clearly going to need some kind of device to help your body deal with the speeds that we're going at. They don't explain how
Mm,
they get the thing to that speed, all of those other problems.
right.
But they did think a little bit about like how does the physics work here? And then with the quantum computing, I think the promises they make with the quantum computing are totally unrelated to the reality of the situation, even the possible reality of the situation. So I think that's a
Yeah.
different question on the physics side.
Yes. Well, in its defense, I say that that whole line about the quantum computer taking over the communications and just lickety split figuring out everything, I said that's about as believable as Will Smith, going up to the Martian ship and logging in with his little laptop and bringing it all down. I said, well, if we could do that with our little laptop, I believe the quantum computer can do this. I'm going to suspend belief and go with it. I'm going to go with, what was it?
Can I say a little
550A?
bit? Can I say a
Yeah.
little bit about what we actually find quantum computers to be interesting for? This is just like a little bit of physics nerdery. Is that can I drop that
Give
in
it to
our
me. Give it
conversation?
all to me.
Yeah. So I think like the interesting thing is, when we think about a computer, like the computers that we have in front of us that we're using to communicate and the folks using to watch this, these are classical computers. And these computers operate on the fundamental idea of something called a bit. So a bit is composed of either a one or a zero. You've probably
Hmm.
heard something like this before. And the bit can only be in the one state or the zero state. It has to be in either one of those. In a quantum computer, you have something called a qubit. So this is a cutesy name that apparently somebody made up as a joke, and then it just kind of stuck, a qubit. And there you have the one and the zero, but it now has quantum features, so it obeys something called superposition, which means it can be in the one and the zero state potentially at the same time. It can be in a mix of states. And so this is what makes the quantum computer different.
Oh.
And, I think reasonable estimates of why a quantum computer is useful and interesting right now is if you want to use a computer to model a system where you really need the quantum mechanical features to come out, then you would use a quantum computer. But actually, anyone promising you that quantum computers are just going to be able to do everything faster and smarter and better is probably selling you a bridge, or some snake oil. And so it was kind of interesting that they were priming their audience for this idea of what quantum computers can do, I think to build support for quantum computing. But really, the reason governments are interested in quantum computers is because they can break codes. So this is like a
Ah.
major cryptography question. And I think that's the reason that any government would actually be interested in a device like that. Which
Okay.
they have
And
they
that's
have a plot point about this in the movie, right?
that's that's that is so funny because the first time Andy Lau's character and his senior talking about the computer, and he says, well, I can, they get it all set up. They're the only two that know, they're on the moon at this point, and they're the only two that know how to work this computer. They need this quantum computer now because something jammed up on the moon. They got to bring the quantum computer up there, and this is going to set the thing back to, they're going to be able to get it done because the
Right.
quantum computer is coming in there. And only the senior guy knows the password. And it just cracked me up because he was like, well, put your password in, and then Andy Lau turns around. I said it was like an ATM moment. Like I was like, wait, are you telling me that you got a password that you're gonna like hit like 6 digits for this quantum computer? What are you putting in there? I don't understand what's happening here. That you gotta turn around for a second. Like I'm gonna like, okay, I'm over here at Bank of America. I died. I just went, okay, no, there's got to be more to that, to getting into that computer than that. But I'm gonna let it go. Let
And
it
I think what
go.
you're raising is also one of the kind of in terms of the narrative structure of the film that's really interesting. is that this movie is kind of like 3 movies with 2 plots kind of put
Mm.
together in a way that really shouldn't work, but somehow sort of does work. Like, if someone told you about that on paper, you'd be like, break that up. Break it up. That's not gonna work.
It's
Like,
not
is it
gonna
a
work.
quantum computing movie or is it a wandering Earth through space movie? Is it a father who's longing for his daughter and trying to figure out how to extend her life movie? Or is it about this guy who's trying to save his son by getting the Earth out of the solar system? And somehow it is both of those movies, and the plots are linked together in this way where these are 2 characters who are kind of like the stars of their own films, but they don't meet, and they don't actually have
Yeah,
anything
ever.
directly to do with each other.
But they're both trying to save their children the only way they know how. That's all they wanna
Right,
do is save their family. It's
right.
and that it was there was so many emotional moments in this crazy,
Mm.
overwhelming, science-driven film that I just was amazed that they were able to get in there. I know it's a long-running film, but I loved all of those points that you just made, that these people were doing all of these things. Andy Lau's character had his daughter died in a car accident, which was his own damn fault. I don't know why he was looking back, but
Mhm.
whatever.
I That
And
always makes me nuts in movies. I'm like, "Look at the road. Look at the
look at
road.
the road. Look at the road.
Look at the road."
And then anybody that knows a Korean drama, let me just tell you this right now, they get taken out by the white truck of doom. I could not believe
Mhm.
they actually did that movie trope too. He just went through a light, the truck crashes, he gets T-boned. I'm like, what is happening? This is the most brilliant man on earth. He don't know enough to like keep your eyes on the road. You got your daughter and your wife in the back seat. Anyway, so then it's up to they save the daughter's essence in the quantum
Yeah,
computer, or he takes
right.
he takes his daughter to the digital life people, and they experiment on her, basically. I mean, it's just like, oh my god.
It's like that, for people who haven't seen the movie but have seen that Amazon Prime show, Upload, it's basically the same
Mm,
concept where
correct. Yes.
she's taken to this computer and uploaded. The difference is in Upload, you can't survive the upload process because, like, I think your brain explodes. I can't remember, actually, it's been a while since I watched Upload, but I think that's basically, like, it for you, whereas in this movie, you can make a digital copy of yourself at a particular moment in time and keep going. And so there is a copy of Andy Lau that's from an earlier time. And so we watch him age while knowing that there is this younger digital version of him on a disk drive, basically, right?
Yes, yes. So there's a lot to this movie, and we're not going to get into all of it in an hour. But I want to hit a couple of points. First of all, was this a couple of questions about, was this really good science? So you wanted to talk a little bit about our relationship to the moon, and one of the main things that happened in this movie is that they had to separate from the moon. And even when I heard that, I was like, oh my god, like, what do you mean we're never going to see the moon in the sky again? I thought that was really so sad.
I so I should start by saying, so my first name Chanda means moon in
Oh,
Hindi, and it actually comes from Sanskrit. It means moon in Sanskrit, and so a lot of languages from that area have the same name with the same meaning. So because of that, I kind of grew up with this feeling of like being connected to the moon in some way. And
I bet.
I feel protective of it. And so actually one of the things that's striking about this movie is the difficult decision that they have to make, that they have to get rid of the moon in order to save the earth. And they have a monument. So there is a moment in the movie where they recognize that. And I think what stood out to me about that is that simultaneously they kind of normalize, like they make it seem normal for people to go to the moon and have built things on the moon, and they have
Mhm.
like moon research stations. They've clearly mined helium-3 from the moon, which is actually, it's believed that the moon has more helium-3 than Earth does. And so there is actually some discussion about mining helium-3 on the moon. this is a real conversation. And so I will say, like, bringing it out into the real world, they're kind of saying, oh yes, the moon is our like this important part of our spiritual existence and our cosmology, but
Right.
also the moon is this resource for us to use. And I think that that is an opportunity for us to think about what it means for people to be returning to the moon with NASA's planned Artemis mission. I mean, if anything in the government ever gets to do anything ever again, we'll see,
Mhm,
because everything
mhm.
seems to be frozen at
Everything's
NASA right
frozen right
now.
now, right?
Everything seems to be frozen. But in the scenario where China and the United States and various private companies now are starting to think about doing stuff on the moon, what we're talking about is a situation where people are going to change the moon, and a small number of people are going to make that decision on behalf of the entire species, on behalf of the entire planet. And so I think that this is actually an invitation for us to think really deeply about what it means to permanently make that decision on behalf of
Mm.
our species, of changing the moon and changing what people see when they pull out their telescope or their binoculars and look at it. And so I really just want to say that I think that witnessing that moment of losing the moon and the dramatic way that they lose the moon is rough.
Oh,
And I think also invites us to really think about, the moon was just recently designated an at-risk World Heritage Site. And I think that this is important. And so I encourage people, when you watch the movie or if you go back and watch it again, to think maybe we should have a democratic process where we really all think very carefully and closely about what it means to make changes to the moon.
yeah. It was a very, very emotional scene of uh, and that's like, what, halfway through the movie? I don't know,
Yeah, yeah. I
maybe?
mean, and you feel like, okay, this has to be the high point of the movie, and then the movie keeps going for like another hour and a half, and you're like,
Oh,
oh, there's all
that's
this.
oh my god. Now,
So I'm
my
seeing
other thing that I go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm seeing in the comments that someone says if we left our solar system, our planet would simply freeze solid for the most part. And so I just want to say this is addressed in the movie, and it's also basically the premise of the plot in the first Wandering Earth movie, which is why these underground cities are important.
Right.
And I think there's an interesting question there of whether the core of the Earth is actually hot enough for that to be a sufficient energy source for it's 2,500 years, right? You had all your
Yes.
numbers down at the beginning, by the way. I was very impressed
Oh,
by that because they
thank you.
threw a lot of numbers at you at the beginning. Like,
Oh my god, yes. It's like
so
I
many
said, I had to see
numbers.
it 3 times. But, so the other thing about that I wanted to ask you about, speaking of numbers, and yes, they did address the freezing because we saw the Earth slowly freezing. That scene of Shanghai totally frozen. I mean, whoa, it was painful.
Yep.
Some parts of this movie are definitely dark and painful. But, it really kinda makes you think, like, "Look, like, come on, we gotta get on this." Like you said, they are using the sun going nova in place of climate change, and so, the beginning of the movie states it, like, there were wildfires, there were
Mhm.
flood, it starts off with this little, paragraph, and it's like, "This is right now," and then it's the
Yes.
voiceover says, "And no one really cared about those things until it affected everyone." And that's how the movie starts. Then we go into,
Mm.
Libreville. It's like, oh wow, we are here for the ride. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about was there was, I think it was because we left the moon. Now the length of the day became 60 hours, and all the clocks now were on a 60-hour. So it was like 30.35 o'clock. What was that about? I didn't get that. I said, I'm gonna wait till the doctor's
So,
here to ask her what that was about.
this is a detail that I didn't spend a lot of time on, but I think there are a couple of things playing out here, right? Which is that they also have these kind of comments about stopping the Earth's rotation, and they
Right, that was
don't
it. It was it.
really. Yeah. So and the Earth's rotation is the source of our concept of a day. The Earth's rotation in relation to how long it takes to go all the way around the axis. And, our concept of the day is how much of your time are you spending facing the sun? That's
The sun.
traditionally what it is. Now we have this 24-hour clock that, even people who are in regions where the sun doesn't go down in the summer and doesn't come up in the wintertime still follow this clock, even if the day and the night are kind of for months long at a time. Um, and I think it raises really interesting questions about our sensibilities about time and the relevant units of time to how our world is organized, because and we see a little bit of this for the Trekkies, and I know there are several Trekkies in the audience, right? Which is
A
that
couple.
you do have these other solar systems where the planets are different, and maybe it's actually a binary star system and not just one star. And so I don't think for sci-fi fans it's a totally foreign idea. But what's different about this movie is I think that this is uniquely where we see people modifying their planet, not just the surface, but the dynamical movement of the planet in a way that shifts what might seem like a normal day. And as the Earth is getting farther from the sun, and this is maybe more of a story for the first movie because we're in the prequel, but your sense of the day is going to shift as you get further from the sun, I think. I think
Yeah.
that's part of it. I guess it's actually maybe I should just say the reason that they need the Earth to stop rotating is because all of the Earth engines that are pushing the planet are on one side of the Earth, and so they need the Earth to have a front and a back, and you can't have that if it's rotating. If it was rotating, it would never go in a straight
It would
line,
never
and
go
they
anywhere.
actually
It
have a
just
plan. Although, I guess at the end of the movie, we do hear they have this plan that they're going or towards the end. It was a very long, like, hour-long ending, right? That they're gonna,
right.
slingshot the Earth off the sun by orbiting the sun 10 times and gathering
Yeah,
energy
and
to
then right.
slingshot out of the
And
solar system,
and
right?
right. I I I just loved everything about that. I was just totally into the whole, "What are we gonna do?" The 10,000 engines that were plotted all along where the tectonic plates were the strongest. I mean, there's just so much in this
Mm.
film, you just can't even get over it. It's a lot of science. But, those were the things I definitely wanted to talk about before we get to it, and there's so much more in this. We wanted to talk a little bit about the actors who were in this. I Okay, my guy that I love now, I love Andy. Andy Lau is definitely cool. And I did love Wu Jing, who played the young astronaut. But the man of the hour was definitely the character, Mr. Zhao, who was the head of the
Mm.
Chinese liaison. He was Mr. Cool through this whole movie. This old man never wavered, never flustered, never lost. He kept the mission in front of him while everybody was screaming and running around, and they were like, well, we can't do this, and we got to change our idea, and we got to go back. The Americans are going to pull out of everything. Mr. Zhao just kept these people on track. He's like, well, the sun is not changing its time. We don't have any more
Right,
time. We got to
right.
keep on going. I know I
I was
loved him.
I was very interested by him as a representation of, like, as a human manifestation of a philosophy almost, that he
Hmm.
was kind of representing the political vision of the movie, and he becomes the voice of the political vision of the movie, which is we are
Absolutely.
in crisis. Um, and I think there are pieces to that that are scary, right? Because, he basically says there was actually this line where he says, "In the face of crisis, only responsibility exists." And then he goes on to say, "Unity comes with a price," right? And so there's a lot to unpack there in relation to, for example, Chinese history and the price that various communities have paid for the sense of unity, right? And so I think there is something to reflect on there about what kinds of sacrifices are we talking about. And the
Hmm.
movie doesn't really, it's interesting because we see some sacrifice, but it doesn't emphasize how difficult those sacrifices are in a way that really forces you to sit with, do I think this is worth it? Because, for example, you don't see people going through the lottery. You don't see the
No,
reactions of the people who aren't selected for the lottery. Um,
right.
you don't see the impact on wildlife in the oceans of losing the moon and losing the tides. Um, and you there's a lot that we don't see about the sacrifices that he's saying that we have to make,
Right,
which I think
right.
is putting the gas on the like you're hitting the gas a little bit when for the wandering earth idea by not really like the digital life people are kind of framed as terrorists in the movie for most of
Mhm.
it, even though it kind of comes out at the end that who was in charge is not who you thought was in charge.
Ooh, for real.
Right.
That was let me just say, and I want you all to know because we do have to wrap it up here in a little bit. But this movie has a Marvel type after the credit ending. I just want you to
Yes.
know that.
You have to stay for the
You
credits.
have to
Yes.
stay for the credits, okay? Just know that. Because the first time I watched it, I am a credit reader, and we were going to talk about this film, so of course I'm looking at the credits thinking I could get some English out of these Mandarin credits, but whatever, I'm reading them. So and then the next scene starts and
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, they're going to put a Marvel cap ending on this. Don't tell
Mhm.
me this. No.
But I actually think it's like stronger than that because with the Marvel endings,
Oh
it's
yeah.
kind of like, okay, if you didn't stay for the end of Wakanda Forever, you don't know what they're gonna do next with the Wakanda verse, but you don't need that in order to understand the next movie on some
Right.
level. But this one is
Correct.
really basically like the opening scene of Wandering Earth 3. It really
Yeah.
is that
And
significant plot-wise.
it's just a pivot. It was just like I watched that cap and I just went, what? What? Just the movie just went up
Mhm.
like multiple points after that short, incredible scene. So please don't miss it. Go all the way to the end. So, and I guess, we're coming to the end here too. So, but
I could talk
um,
about this movie for another couple of
oh,
hours. Like
when we stop the stream, you and I probably will be, but I'm in Tamia's house, so I gotta go home. But yes, I could. I will call you up because I have your phone number, and we will talk more about this film because it is just such a great film. And
Mhm.
I cannot thank you enough for turning me on to it. I cannot wait for Wandering Earth 3. Let's make a plan to watch it together. I will definitely do
Yes.
that.
I
Watch
was just gonna
party or
say,
something.
please consider having me back to talk about Wandering Earth 3. We need to have a series.
Absolutely.
I would yes.
Absolutely, yeah, because we barely touched the surface on this film. We didn't
Mhm.
even get into Andy Lau that much, because and you know how much we love our Andy.
You
Andy
know, I
Lau.
will say he tried really hard not to be sexy, and he pulled it off for most of the movie. Most
They
of
put him in
it.
those glasses. He had that haircut, and
He sure
we
did.
knew it was under those. We knew it was under those clothes. We were like, "Oh no, no, they're not doing this to Andy." Wait,
That
what?
that's right. That's right.
At least Wu Jing got to do some martial arts because he is
Mhm.
from that Hong Kong school of martial arts, and he is a
Yeah.
great fighter, and he had some really good scenes. I was glad to see him get his stuff in, but Andy didn't get to do anything. But anyway, we'll have to watch some other stuff. But we're gonna do something in a minute that's gonna help you out with your Andy Lau love. And so I am gonna go to Yvette, and I'm gonna say, Yvette, we're getting ready. So on my mark, we're gonna do now. I do something where I say I can get any movie in 6 degrees of separation back to Star Trek. And then you named Wandering Earth 2. And let me tell you, your name was in my mouth a couple of times. I was like, uh-oh, this sister just kind of set a sister up. How am I gonna get this Star Trek? This is why did I say that? Yvette even said, she said, why did you say you could do this? I said, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it even with Wandering Earth. So here we go. 6 degrees to Star Trek. So we start in the first position, Andy Lau. Woo, yeah, we love him. Now, I just wanted to tell you something. He is like the combination of Tom Cruise and Frank Sinatra in China. This is the biggest star going over there. He is famous for his film. He is famous for movies. Before there was K-pop, there was a thing called Canto Pop. And he's called one of the four kings of Canto Pop. He is a huge singer, albums, records, movies, everything. And if you saw him like, 30 years ago, you would be as crazy as we are right now. So Andy Lau is in the first degree of separation. So which brings us to the movie that made me fall in love with him, Infernal Affairs. And I am saying Infernal Affairs, made in 2002. And this movie is the movie that is the movie that The Departed is adapted from. So Infernal Affairs is the exact same story as Martin Scorsese's Departed. Andy Lau is playing the Matt Damon part. He is the policeman that is in the force, but he's connected to the mob. And then the man playing the Leonardo DiCaprio part is Tony Leung. Tony Leung is the
I
man
love
that was
him.
in. Oh my God, I love him too. I mean, oh my God. So Infernal Affairs, they got both of them are in that. That movie lays on my heart. I mean, oh my God. So now Tony does the movie. He's our second degree of separation, or actually third. In the Mood for Love, which is a fantastic film. Please write that film down. Infernal Affairs 2002, In the Mood for Love with Tony 2000.
Is
This
that Wong
movie,
Kar-wai? That's a Wong Kar-wai movie, right?
I'm not sure
Do
the
I have it
director.
wrong? Okay, okay,
No, you
okay.
may. I
Sorry.
don't know who directed it. I
Let
should,
me let
but
you do your thing.
oh, so In the Mood for Love was actually submitted to Cannes Film Festival, and Tony wins Best Actor at Cannes. He's the first Asian actor to win Best Actor at Cannes. So that's our third degree. So we go from Andy Lau to Infernal Affairs. We go to the Cannes Film Festival, and that's where we pick up the judge who was at the Cannes Film Festival that voted for Tony. That is Jonathan Demme. Jonathan Demme, in our fourth degree of separation, makes a movie called Rachel Getting Married, which is another great film. He directed that with Anne Hathaway in our fifth position, Rachel Getting Married, the movie, which brings us to our sixth degree of separation because the man that plays Anne Hathaway's father is Bill Irwin. And Bill Irwin, you know as Star Trek Discovery Su'Kal. Duh! And we're there in 6 degrees of separation. Yes,
Amazing.
I have got you from Wandering Earth to Star Trek Discovery. Woof.
Well done. Well done. I couldn't have done that. So yes, well done.
Thank God for Tony going to Cannes because that was the only connection. That's the only way I could get the whole thing back to the to the United States. Jonathan Demme. So anyway,
Amazing.
we are gonna that is our show for tonight. But I want to make sure that everyone knows where they can reach you, Chanda, because you are just so fantastic.
So you can find me on Bluesky as Chanda at bsky.social. And you can also find me on Instagram, at least for now, at chanda.prescod.weinstein. And you can also pick up my book, The Disordered Cosmos, A Journey into Dark Matter, Space-Time, and Dreams Deferred. Pretty much anywhere, I encourage you to shop your local indie or your local brick and mortar, if that's Barnes & Noble, or get your library to order it. We love libraries. Thank you
But
so much
I
for
already
having
got.
me.
Oh, this has been so much fun, and like I said, we're gonna talk about this movie even more because I really this has become one of my favorite science fiction films, and I am just loving it, loving everything about it. I'm gonna watch it another time because I want to watch this and Wandering Earth, and Wandering Earth 3. We'll do a movie watch. So everyone, it has been wonderful being back. Just so thank you for being part of our amazing community, everyone. And now, if you're new, make sure you subscribe, like, or ring the bell so you won't miss any of our great guests or sci-fi reviews. Get your brand in front of a passionate, movie-savvy audience by sponsoring CinneCine Go Sci-Fi, a sci-fi sister production. It's a unique chance to connect a loyal consumers who love movies, inside insights from directors, screenwriters, and fans. And it doesn't matter if you're a small business or an individual. It's a great way to reach an engaged, story-driven community. So click the link down in the show description to sponsor me or visit sci-fi-sisters.com. That's SyFy-sistas.com/sponsors to learn more. And then join me on February 19th for the next episode of CinneCine Go Sci-Fi, where I will have Laurie Ulster from TrekMovie.com and we're going to discuss the film time after time. So that's our show for tonight. Thank you for being here. Check it out on SyFy Sistas Inc. over on our YouTube channel, and I'll see you next time.
Bye.